All right. Class 18. We were going over part 1 of 3 of React. It is, I think, so today's Monday. On Thursday, we have part 2. And then next Monday, you'll get more information on Thursday. But next Monday, there will not be an official lecture nor studio. It's kind of like a catch-up day. I'm pretty sure I heard somewhere through the grapevine that they still want you attendance. And then you'll just go straight to your studio thing, but don't hold me accountable to that. You will get very specific information on Thursday about that, but plan on showing up on Monday, plan on working hard on Monday. It just will be more for catch-up things. And then next Thursday will be the last lecture for Unit 1. So, and then also on Thursday, I'll go over the last graded assignment, which is way easier than this one. So don't get too stressed out about that. So again, unfortunately, this is pretty much my only slide because I think there's so much code that we're just going to spend more time on the coding. But I just wanted to bring up some mainly vocabulary. Whenever they talk about library versus framework, framework usually provides that structure that I'm talking about. And whenever I'm working in Angular, Angular provides a framework, a structure that you have to live by to make it work. So Angular is considered a framework because it's not just bringing in methods and things that you can use. It's also setting up the structure for it. React is not that way. Yes, there is some common good practices with React. There are some ways that you have to do it, but it allows you a lot more freedom to do what you think is best. So React is technically just a library, not a framework. We're talking about components. This is not React specific. Almost any time you're dealing with a section of code, it can be called a component. So these are React components. They have functional and class components. I will try my best during the coding part to show you the differences between those, but there's not a lot of differences at your level right now. If it comes up again in part 2 or part 3, I might go into more detail. But just know that there are functional ones, which is a function, and then class ones where you say class. That's pretty much the only difference for you guys right now is just knowing what keyword to put in front of it. What's weird is they talk about props. I don't always like when they do this. They talk about props, but I don't think they actually use any because I was looking for that. Props are your parameters that you're passing between components. So because I don't really remember that in the examples, I won't go over it in detail right now. You just need to know props is their wording, their vocabulary for parameters and variables they pass amongst components. Vite, I want to say a year ago, Vite was not the leading one in developing React apps. Again, React, you can do almost whatever you want to. So Vite is not the only builder that you can use for React. There's a ton of different ones out there. It used to be, I think it's Webpack. It was like exclusively, not exclusively, but everybody used Webpack because you could do create React app. In one of the things in LaunchCode, I saw it say you need to type in create React app. But then once you actually get into part 1, it never tells you that. It says do the npm create Vite at latest. And that's what it tells you to do. And that's because it used to be create React app. Like that was the name of the command that you would use. That Webpack builder has gotten, well, it has stayed the same speed. Vite and other ones have increased their speed by so much that when you get to a big, huge project, they don't want to use Webpack anymore because it takes too long to build. So that's why, again, another example of React is just always changing. There's other people developing things, not just in the language, but even the builders to help developer experience. And then We will talk about creating and calling components. The big call out that I want you to be aware of is you do need to name your things in uppercase when they're a custom component, like a React component, where the lowercase tags, like the P and the H1 and the div and all of those, are all lowercase. That's to help us whenever we're debugging and looking at code, we know, is it a custom component or is it a built-in component? So that's a huge call out there. Reading the questions, props or parameters or properties. Yeah, they're technically properties as well. I think of them more like parameters or arguments that you're passing. You're passing in an argument into a component, and then the component code is accepting them as a parameter. So if you think of them like a function, it helps me realize that they're getting passed in just like arguments and parameters are, but they technically are properties. Again, all the normal stuff, and I think technically graded assignment 5 is due today. And then again, I'll talk about graded assignment 6 next lecture. That's pretty much it. Short, quick, to the point. The first thing I wanted to make sure that we went over was a lot of people were asking questions on the exercises. So if you have any questions over the actual reading material, you can post those and I will slowly answer those. And if I don't answer it and your chat goes way too high, ask it again. I don't get upset by you guys asking the same thing if I didn't answer it. But I mainly want to go over this exercise because this goes over just about everything they talk about. We know how to fork, we know how to clone. I guess for me, actually, I don't want to do this first. I want to do the other thing first. Let's do the other thing. The other thing is actually creating a React app. That's something we did not. It's something that we need to do. So here's my launch code. Of course, you don't need to read anything on here, but this is my launch code folder, like homework. I'm going to go here and make a new folder. One called lecture. I'm going to go in here and create a new folder. Called React Part 1. One of the questions was, how do we know where to put these folders at? And of course, my screen is so itty bitty, I'm not expecting you to be able to read all these words. But mainly, the key is to not put a project inside of another project. If you can just do that right there, a lot of the other stuff will take care of itself. Meaning, I made a homework folder, and then each of my things are going to be separate folders inside that. So do not put this inside of your JavaScript project. Make sure that make sure that you make your own for each of these things. So don't overlap your projects. And then I think for creating, it says to go ahead. So on Saturday, I met with somebody that, he works in React, like he's a professional developer that works in React. And he even had to Google this thing because he's like, it changes. He always wants to make sure that he has the greatest and best one. So I want to create it right here. So I usually right click here and do open in terminal. This is the fastest way for me to do it. I just go where I want it. I say open in terminal. And then I paste npm. So you do need to start knowing what some of these things mean. So npm is Node Package Manager. So we're still using Node. You can't run this unless if you have Node already installed. And then create is a command that npm knows, and then it knows what Vite is, and it's installing the latest version of Vite. And then this is going to say a bunch of things. Hey, do you want to install these? I say, yeah, why not? And now it wants a project name. So I'm going to say lecture part 1. My package name. Let's keep that the same. The framework, this is where you get to go through here. There was one person, I don't know if a lot of you did this, but if you run any of these things in your git bash, because that's what it looks like a terminal. Git bash is not a terminal. It does weird things, so make sure you're using this in actual terminal, like Windows PowerShell. You can see that at the top here is PowerShell. And then React. I did look up, so we have talked about, but then again, Angular is TypeScript only, so that's why the book brought it up. You do need to know what it is, but we're not going to develop in it. And then there's JavaScript. This SWC is a different type of builder that goes on top of that's like a faster, newer thing. Again, another thing to show off that all of this JavaScript stuff changes all the time. So technically, I think you can select probably either one of those, but let's do what the book says, and let's just do the JavaScript. It actually tells you now run. So I'm in my React Part 1 folder that I created. All of these things created another directory called lecture part 1, because that's what my project name and package name is. So I need to go inside of that. So I'm going to do CD lecture part 1. And then it says you need to install all the dependencies in NPM, and then you need to do the run dev. I'm not going to do these inside here. I'm going to do them inside VS Code because I want to show you some things. But now that I am inside here, I can do code and dot. Dot means here. So I'm going to open this directory up in code right now. So I open this up. This is what I'm going to make this a little bigger. So all of this is installed by default whenever you do Vite and use Vite to install this. If you look, nothing here technically says React. Whenever the computer first starts to run, it always looks for this index.html. So let's open up what that is and let's see what it says. It says that it brings in the generic things. It has an image. It has an image that it brings in. It says the title is this. And then in the body, this is how, I don't know if it's Vite specific, but React, it creates an empty div with an ID of root. You'll see this in all of them. And then it brings in a script of type module. And then this is where your next set of code comes in. So again, there's all of this. And again, I can't even run this until I do the other commands that I said. So we're going to do in terminal. In terminal, this PS over here means PowerShell. So somebody was saying, hey, in VS Code, I'm running this. That's because you're really running, if you're on a Windows, you're really running PowerShell. You can select different ones. So I can, maybe I can't. Yeah, you can select different types of terminals that you want to run over here. Some of you won't have this Ubuntu on there. If you're a Windows, I've installed this. So you can install, you can run different things, but that's why it still works. Because me running it here in PowerShell versus me running it here in PowerShell, it's the same thing. But in here, I need to do npm I or install, either way. But remember, the whole reason I wanted to do it here is I wanted to show you what it's actually doing. It's looking at this package.json, and it's looking for all the dependencies like React. And then it is going to install these dev dependencies. ESLint is a linter, which is like a styling. It's supposed to help you with making sure that your code fits the format that it needs to. And then also Vite. So these are all the things that it's going to install for us. Yeah, ESLint. You see what it's installing. So that's that ESLint plugin React, which is this one. So yeah, it's just going through this package.json and installing anything that I put inside here. One of the reasons why I wanted to go through the basic one here, I don't know if anybody else, I didn't see anybody ask about it, but whenever you do this one, to get my project to run, I actually have to do npm run. So npm, again, is Node Package Manager. It's looking at these package files, and it's specifically in this thing going to be looking here. And I'm going to say run, and run just says do something like run, and then you have to say what to run. And these are the scripts that you can run. And so for us, we're going to do npm run dev because we actually want to run Vite. I don't know if anybody else noticed, you actually don't do in the provided material, you don't do npm run dev, you actually do npm run start. And I'll show you why once we get to that project. But in this one, you have to do npm run dev to start this Vite up. And then I have my local host here. And this is the beginning of me going back and forth between VS Code and the browser. So some things to call your attention to. I know you probably can't read everything at the top, but there is a Vite icon, and it says Vite plus React. If I look at my code in my index HTML, that is coming from my image and from my title. So I can, instead of saying Vite and React, I can say whatever I want to. And then as I save this, up at the top, I don't know if you can read it, but it does say Phillips Playground on my title now. So if you want to change the title, you're looking at this index HTML here, and this is where you change it. This is the entry point to everything that we're doing. And then what's happening is once it actually gets into the body, it goes to this script. So if you hold down control and it lights up, like if I'm not doing control, and then I hold control, it lights up. If I click on this, it should open up main.jsx. Main.jsx is the next link of what it follows. So on this, it says React strict mode. Just leave that there. I'm not going to go over in detail. You can Google that if you want. But what this does is in the DOM, it creates a document and it puts it in that root. So it gets the element by ID. Remember the element by ID right here that says root. So inside this div, it starts creating this stuff inside there. Again, you don't really need to know how it works, just that that's what it's doing. And then it says, hey, I made this app component. Remember, it's capital A, so it's a custom component here. If I control and click on this, it'll actually open up my app.jsx. So this is the thing that's actually getting loaded right here in this component. Too big. So inside this, then we just keep going. It has a use state. These are called hooks. We'll talk about those at a later time. And then it just does all of this stuff inside here. So what is it? This does a div that has vite.js.dev. If you hover over this, this is my vite.js.dev, and I can click on it and go here. This is this tag here, the React dev. So that's this thing, and when I click it, it goes to react.dev. It gives an H1 of Vite and React, H1 of Vite and React. It has a class name. Remember, divs are just divisions. That's all that matters. You're dividing and separating and combining things based on divs, but divs by themselves don't do anything. And inside this div, there's a button. And this button, and we'll talk about these set counts and these hooks later. But that's what this is that's this button right here. And whenever you click on it, it goes up. There's an edit, save, edit, save. That's this line. And then outside the div, there's another paragraph that says click on the Vite and React logos to learn more. And that's this thing right here. So I'm hopefully showing you at least that where all this stuff is. There's no extra components here. It is very important to understand at least just whenever you put this up, what are all these files really doing? I wouldn't worry about that one per se. Your CSX or your CSS. So you have root and you have logo and you have these. These should at least look somewhat familiar. Just saying that you have the dot. Remember, the dot is the class, so it's looking for a card class. It's looking for a read the docs class. So where did it go? Right down here, there's a class name called read the doc. So it's linking that with this thing right here. So there's a lot of linking, and you need to be able to get just a little bit quicker on when you see class name read the docs and you want to know, hey, why does it look like the way it does? That's probably CSS. So I'm just going to go to the CSS file and look for that. Your index.css, this is like your global CSS. So everything, all of your components should be reading out of this. So if you want something to be not component specific, but can be read anywhere, styling wise, you put it in here. If you want it for just the component, we usually have a JSX file and then a CSS file. I know that the example that we're going to see here from LaunchCode, they don't name them identical. They name them just slightly different. To be honest, in React or in Angular, they are named exactly the same. One's a JS or JSX and one's a CSS, but they look exactly like they're named the same. So I'm used to that, where these are the same name. Wondering what else. I think that's probably about it. Seeing if there's any other questions. So I'm going to pop over to an already I've been messing around with the LaunchCode example. So when I go here to exercises and I go to my starter code, I've already got my starter code up and running. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but I did want to highlight, it says you should be able to run using this npm start. So that's the first thing I'm going to kind of show you in our thing. That's the one I was just showing you. I'm going to close out of that. It's this one. So if I go to, I'll make this slightly bigger. When I go to this package.json, if I go to the scripts, underneath the scripts, that Vite, that's how you start your thing. It actually says start. It doesn't say dev. So this is how I know whenever I want to run this, I'm actually going to do npm start because I want it to run this command. So it's in your scripts. You'll do npm run, and then these are your options that you can do. You do not need to know what any of these are except Vite runs your thing. That's the only one you need to know. So whatever one calls Vite is the one you want to do. And LaunchCode set this up as start, and that's fine. That's what it used to be all the time. As you could see with the new one, I think they're starting to switch this to dev. Anyway, so let me run that real quick. This is what mine looks like right now. I'll show you kind of what I've done, and then we'll play around with this. And then, especially if you guys remember anything that you guys got stuck on, let me know. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go straight through the thing. I'm going to go a little faster this time. I'm going to close all these. I'm going to go a little faster on the how this pulls together. The first thing it does is it looks at this index HTML that's outside of everything. And here, this is where it gets the fave icon. It doesn't like to show it, but it gives your favorite icon, which is, I think, the React icon there. It calls it a React app. I could call this lecture part 1 if I wanted to. What that does is it changes the tab up at the very top of the browser. So that's what that changes. And then again, just like we did before, this has an empty div with an ID of root, and then it brings in the index.jsx. So if I click on this, control click on this, it'll open up my index.jsx. This thing does the same thing. It has the strict mode, it has the app, and it creates all of my HTML. It's going to create inside that root div. And then if I control click on the app, this is my main app. This is app.jsx. This is where it makes a div called class name, called app. You can name this whatever you want to. But I have a chores list, I have a movie list, I have a book list. I have not created, that's what I'm going to do with you guys, just so you can see it, that other component. Be very honest, I even forgot what it was called right now, but there's another component that I'll look at the example and go through. But I just want to show you what I have already. If I go to chores list, if I wanted to see, well, this is my chores list, but I don't know in code what this means, I can control click this and it'll open up my chores list. If I look here, I'm importing from React. For this class, these are my classes, like my CSS classes. I'm pulling it in from my chores list.module. That's where this is slightly different than what I'm used to. I'm actually used to components and actually putting I would do components and then I would add another file called book list and then put in my JSX and my CSS in that folder. I'd make a separate folder inside of components called chores list, and then I'd have the JSX and CSS inside there. So I usually start making folders for everything, directories for everything, and that is because I'm just conditioned that this thing will grow. So if this is as big as my file, if my thing will ever get, then I don't need to do that. But if I know that I'm going to start adding pages and start adding other components and start adding more complexity, it's best to start having only one thing in each directory at first, because it is much harder to break those apart afterwards. So I know that this is as much as I'm going to have. I'm going to add one other component and that's it. So I'm fine with not doing all that. I just want to throw that out there, especially when we get into Unit 3 and you're creating a whole entire project. You'll want to think about your directory structure. So I had this chores list. I created some chores, whatever they are. So the book talked about functional components versus class components. Based on line 4, I know which one I have. Based on line 4, I'm looking, do I have what looks like the beginning of a function? Or do I have what looks like the beginning of a class? And the only way that I know it's a class is because the keyword class would be in there. So I know that this is a functional component because it looks like a function. So a const whatever, that's not a function, that's just a constant. But see how it's that's the function notation, right? And this is an arrow function. So it's saying, this is saying it doesn't need any parameters. So there's no parameters getting passed in here. Like I said, there's no props that are getting passed in here, but this is creating a function. So this is, by definition, a functional component. You write them the same. So the only difference I've noticed between class and functional, for the level that you guys are at, the only difference is line 4. That's the only difference. There are other ways to do this. So I'll talk about that in a second, because I think I have an example of all of them here. So the chores list is a functional app using arrow notation. I'm returning So that's another thing. I'm not rendering, I'm returning. A div with some things. I think most of these were either already there or copied and pasted from the movie list. So hopefully this looks at least somewhat normal, because I really do think I just copied this from the movie list. But I did want to show you a different way to do this, because several of you, hopefully many of you are already thinking this. Why do I have all of these different, like, these things all written out? Isn't there a better way to do this? And there absolutely is. So I'm going to actually comment these out. And I'm going to uncomment this. This is the way that I would do it. So chores, remember chores is my array up here. Chores there's that map function that we were talking about last time. So this says for each chore, that's what it kind of does. It maps over the chores. And I'm going to do a chore and an index. So that's with mapping. With mapping, you naturally get two parameters. The first one being the object, or in this case, the string. So the first parameter is always whatever's inside there. And the second parameter is always the index number. So mapping always gives you those two. If you don't use the index, you don't have to, like if I wasn't going to use the index right here, I would just do like this, because I don't want to pull in something I may never use. So only pull things in if you know you're going to use them. But then my index is going to be my key. And then my class name, and up here, it doesn't really have the key value, but this is what I'm used to seeing. You usually have an ID or a key. And then your class name is going to be whatever your class, this again is because of the chore text, which is the chores text class in my CSS that I linked. That's why that's there. And then this is the actual text. Just a reminder, whenever you're doing JSX, if I do something like this, it knows this to be HTML. It just knows this is HTML. For me to be able to write JavaScript, you have to wrap your script in curly braces. So I don't remember the book saying that. So I just want to make sure I call that out. To write JavaScript, I can't just write it like this. It won't, like, it's thinking that this is the end of a tag. I mean, that's why it's highlighting that, because it thinks it's the end of a tag. If you do curly braces, though, it understands that everything inside here is JavaScript. So I wrote this in JavaScript. Here's my line items. Here's the end of the line, end of the list, and there's my div. And if I go back, nothing changed. Everything is still there. It goes through all four things. What's cool about this is if I add an extra thing, and save it, then it dynamically updates into my HTML. So there's that little tidbit of information. Also, remember, we've already talked about these kind of things. Anytime you want another component to see this, you do have to use this export tag or keyword, export keyword, because if I get rid of this, the things that are looking for this won't know where it's at, and then it's going to cause an error, and it's going to cause my whole site to crash. So the other components cannot get access to this unless if you say, hey, I'm purposely exporting this so other people can import it. So make sure that you have that. Now, I copied and pasted something that I probably shouldn't have, but we'll get past it. The next one I wanted to show you, because I'm not going to go through it as detail. I just really want to highlight this top line here. On this one, I did the export default function and then called the name of my function here. So hopefully this won't mess up visualization here too much. But let's look at the difference between these two. If I made a constant variable, and I said this constant variable is going to be a function. Well, if you remember, I can do arrow functions or I can do named functions like this. So those are both fine. Those are JavaScript things that it doesn't matter. I do want to highlight, though, you can do an export default. And remember, this is a variable, and that variable represents this function. Or you can just do export default and then call the function. You see how those mean the same thing? I'm making it and then exporting it. And this one, I'm just exporting it kind of as I make it. I will tell you, this is what I see most. I see the export at the bottom. I see this thing being made and then being exported at the bottom. So if you're asking which of these will work, I say that you'll probably see both of them at some point. What I would set your default, unless you hear otherwise from somebody, I would set my default go-to is this right here. You set a variable, and this is your component name. And then have an arrow function. Oftentimes we have props that we pop in here. So you'll see this quite often. And then put the export down at the bottom. So I showed you the good one first. So somebody got a question of function book list. Did they give you a book list? I thought they did. So I'm confused on the question. So if you want to re-ask that. So the question, can there be only one function in each? No. There are ways that I could have done all of this actually in one file. They don't care. Then I wouldn't even have to do the export technically. I can just call it within itself. Again, we're trying to prepare you for more or less enterprise applications, like bigger applications. And in bigger applications, you want for the readability and for the debugging and for all of that other clean code stuff, you will want all components to have their own file. So that is very common. Now, I have seen whenever we get into not just components, but services, I don't know if they go into it, but a good example is, let's say that I do like user login. I'm going to have a service. I'm not going to always have a web page or a component that does that. I'm going to have a service that calls another service that validates my user. So my front end is not going to validate who I am. It's actually like either Azure or Google or a back-end service that's going to validate that. I might have to make three different calls to validate that. So I might actually have 3 different functions inside of a service. And unfortunately, I haven't read far enough in React to know how they do that yet. But even in Angular, each component would just have one file for each component. Again, whenever people say can there, in JavaScript, the answer is probably yes to whatever you ask. Can there be 10 different things in one file? JavaScript's fine with that. Can there be just one and you do 10 different files? JavaScript will do that. Now, the question should be, should you do that? And so that I am not as confident in my answer, but anytime you separate things out, I like that because then the structure is then scalable. So, 2 exports are doing the same thing. So what is the other export? I'm going to try to explain. So instead of me saying, maybe if I just do it in the same thing, if I did const book list equals this, and then at the bottom, which this is a bad one to do because there's too much, I would do export default book list. No, not that. Book list. That's what I was saying. You could export it down at the bottom, or you can export it here. Either one will work. So I'm telling you, I don't like this way. I've seen it more common using a function with a const and then export at the bottom. That's what I'm used to. Anyway, let's keep going through this book. I copied and pasted this from LaunchCode, so just don't get too upset with the book thing. I did want to go over how you get the books because I think there was some. Why is there an error? Did I change something? Okay. So when I did the book list, some people I think were confused on how to get this. So I just want you to see how I did it. I went over here and I said book cover images. If you had specific books that you wanted, you could do which ones you want. So I said, oh, this Harry Potter and the Cursed Child is perfect for me to show off. So from here, I right-clicked here and I said, like open image in new tab. When I go here, if it only shows the text and nothing else, this is the URL that you can grab at the top here. So again, because the other ones do have way too much, let me do this one. I'm going to right click. I'm going to say open image in new tab. I go over here. I see that it's only the book. It's not anything else. So I can copy this. And I can somehow figure out why LaunchCode put all this text in here. All right. And I can say, go do this book. And so when I go back to my thing here, there's my first book, there's my second book. Sometimes you can do copy image address. I want to say for me specifically, that usually works most of the time. So copy image address. All right, so yeah, that one worked just fine. I don't trust everything. I just coding enough and doing these things, I assume a lot of things, and then it's whenever you assume things that things backfire. So yes, the fastest way is this copy image address. I always then copy and paste it and put it into a new link anyway. So it's my little 2 cents. All right. Oh. Now I got my 3 books. This is what I was saying. We're going to do some designing on the fly because this is not cool. So let's do some styling on this. I don't think that this was asked of us, but let's do it. There are 2 different places we can do styling. We can do it inline, so we can do it right here, or we can make a CSS file and bring it in. Just to make sure that this kind of works, style. Style, and then I'm going to say is that going to work? It did not work. Look at that. I thought I had an inline style somewhere. You're right. It is not equals. I don't know what I was thinking there. There we go. So in normal HTML, you would not really need a lot. In here, I think you actually need to do double curly braces. Oh, yeah, look at this itty bitty book down there, 50 pixels. Let's make that 500. There we go. And then let's go ahead and put this on all of them. There we go. So we're all on the same thing. So if you didn't know, you have to wrap. This means that there's going to be code, and I think this means that you're making a CSS object, is I think what that means. But CSS, you need to do 2 of them. Just like the source, usually you don't have to put brackets there around the source, but because this, remember this is like, I'm saying I'm putting code there. I'm putting code, and then I think this is an object, allowing me to do multiple things if I wanted to. All right, so that's looking a little bit better. So we know how to do inline styling. Yeah, you can make that whatever you want to. Anything else? All right. So that's my book list. The only other thing is the movie one. So let me just show you that real quick, and then we're going to make a new one, and then I'll talk about assignment 5, and then we'll get out of here. So, actually, did I even do anything? Okay. So the only thing I really wanted to show here is here's this class component. So remember how I said I'd show you a little bit of each of them. This one is a class component rather than a function component. When you really look at it, did it really do anything differently? I don't really see much of a difference here. The biggest thing is whenever you do a class component, I think it does want you to bring in a React component, which I did not have to do on this because it's just a function. So this is naming it. So that's less code that I have to worry about. And then also it says render instead of return. So it's rendering this rather than returning it. But everything else is about the same. This is a return down here, but this is the, so remember how in classes we had a constructor? You could do a constructor here. So class components give you access to these other built-in React functions, methods. So that would be the reason you would use a class. I just don't know at your guys' level and what we are building if we really need this level. And to be honest, almost everything I see nowadays looks almost identical to this right here. Like this is what I see all the time. So my suggestion is getting used to this one, but understanding you might see these other ones. I'm not going to go through the rest of that. I think classes with this class is pulling in from this. And so if I did movie text, I could switch the different colors to whatever I wanted to, and then that would, what did I break? Oh, yeah. It made this green now rather than blue that I had it before. We could do the mapping here to get them all. So it's just like more dynamic. But I think that's all I needed or wanted. That's all I had to show you that I wanted to touch on for that. My next topic is going to be going over a graded assignment. Oh, good question. I did forget one thing. I would highly suggest downloading an extension or installing an extension. So whenever I go over here and I right click and I say inspect, what I have put in here, I'll try to make this a little bit bigger. What I have added here is the React developer tools. That's what you want to Google. React developer tools. And I went to Google and I went to React developer tools and I guess it's not a download. It's installing this extension called React developer tools. Every browser has their own. I do think if you go to the React version, like side of this, it'll tell you how to install for Chrome, Firefox, and Edge. And then for Safari, you have to do these other things. So definitely follow along with this. I don't have a Mac to be able to test this out and see what it does, but you definitely want to install it because when I go here, it gives me two, you can't really read these, but you can see that there's purple little icons there. One says components, one says profiler. When I was talking to the guy this weekend, he uses these like all the time. He actually knows how to use the profiler really well, but I was like, hey, if I'm just doing these basic things, and he's like, well, you probably don't really need the profiler then, you really need just the components. So whenever I click on this components, it actually shows me all of my components. So whenever we start debugging, now this is different. This is an additional thing. This does not replace some of the other developing tools that we have. What this does do is it shows us if we have props, how it's being rendered. And so each browser has their own version of this. So that's why I would go to the React. This is React's website, react.dev, and I would look at the developer tools and see which of these you have and put them in whichever one you're going to use. Yeah, it doesn't take any, like the Google one was literally, you click on, I don't even have the tab open anymore. You click on it and within like seconds, it's already on there. And then you might have to refresh your page, but otherwise it's pretty fast on even getting it over here. Profiling is like a record button. So you can record things. I don't know how to use this profiler. Whenever I was developing with React before, this props was my biggest headache. And then this is how I solved that because I can see this as it goes through. For instance, maybe I do want my other React thing up. I'm going to go here. Right. So this is that original one that had the count. If I go to inspect element and then I go to my components, and I only had one component. I didn't make anything here. Remember, this was the built-in one that was given to us by Beat. But what's cool is my props and my hooks here, whenever I start clicking this count, you start seeing that it goes up. And if I hit this magic button, it actually tells me the variable name too. So it tells me that it's my count variable and what it is. So it's not, this is behind the scenes. I know that I'm displaying it here, but this is, if I didn't display it, this would still be there. So this is how you can see what they call your state, which is how React deals with variables that are dynamic. And we'll talk about this at a different time. But yes, I would do that. Otherwise, how you debug is just your normal print out the console log. That's the go-to for every language ever. You just start printing things out. I did want to show you this components things before next class though, because I don't know what's in part 2, but if there's props and hooks, I strongly suggest you look at that. Other debugging for React is I don't know. It's just the normal console log. Of course, I don't have anything there. All right, any other questions? With errors, you'll see it in the console log. So if I go here, or it just won't render, which is always great. Like if I forget I know that you didn't see what I just did, but it says something that you'll start at least seeing these. You may not make sense of them yet, but that's where your IDE also comes into play. I know I have this really low, but my IDE shows, hey, there's some redness here, but usually you'll see some kind of error here as well. So console, it'll print out any errors and or won't render the page. All right. Any other questions before we go to assignment 5? Even if you have them, you can ask them. I'll try to come back to them. But with assignment 5, now that you guys are further into it, I'm going to restate what I said last time. But I was even thinking, as I was talking about this, if you hadn't even looked at it or started it, it would not have made any sense. So I'm gonna restart. I'm just gonna re-explain everything real quick, but real quick. All right. Rendering versus returning. Your browser technically renders things. If for your guys's just coding ability, I would just use functional components because those are by far more common now. And then you don't even have to worry about the rendering tag at all, like the rendering keyword. So that's what I would say if somebody asked me. You might want to Google just the differences between rendering and returning if you're just wanting to know vocabulary. But for coding purposes, you don't need rendering because you're going to use functional apps or functional components. Okay. This is assignment 5. As an overview, there's only 2 files that you guys are going to be touching. That's going to be the script and the script helper. I'm going to go in order of what I would do. The first code I would put in here is inside this validate input. I would run this. So some things that you might want to know. Test input will be the text of the input. So this could be your pilot or co-pilot or fuel or cargo level. Like it could be any of those. You don't know what's coming in, but it will be the text or string of that input. That's what you're going to pass into it. Just the input, not the whole component, just the input. And then you need to return whatever it tells you to here, which is empty, not a number, or is a number. Now, you don't even have to give your website to work at this point. That's what the tests are for. So you can create this just with your knowledge of if statements. So saying if test input is empty, you return empty. If it's not a number, you return not a number. And then if it's a number, you return a number. So those are the things that you can just return and rerun your test and it should show. Hopefully that makes sense on the validate input. Some people were wanting to validate even which of these it is. So they were like, well, if fuel level is a number, then keep going or whatever else. That's too sophisticated. you're going to ask them, like, so in your form submission, you're gonna say, more or less, if validate input, and you're gonna throw in pilot. There's multiple ways to do this. This is probably not the best way to do this. This is absolutely not the best way to do this. I would do is empty and then do it the other way. So if it's empty, then you're going to do an alert that says, input cannot be empty or something. I don't know. I'm making up stuff as I go here. I just care more about the structure, not about the individual syntax. That's what I'm telling you right now. I might actually type something in wrong. Just know that might happen. I'm caring more about the structure. So the validate input, you're going to call the validate input, not just on pilot, but all 4 of those. Yeah. I will say that there is 2 parts to this. I have seen a couple people that their website works beautifully, but then some of the tests don't pass. Remember that I think your first go ahead is to make the test pass first, and then try to add whatever you want to. So even if your website does not work the way you want it to, get the test to pass first. So I don't even know if it actually looks for an alert in the test. Yeah. Oh, another thing that I did see, whenever you hit the button on a form, so when you hit this button right here and it submits it, because it is a form, it's going to try to submit. I don't think that they didn't do a very good job of explaining that is going to happen. And so the first thing in this is bad code, event listener. The first thing in your event listener might be event.prevent. And it may not be exactly that. So remember, I'm not writing syntax, I'm writing structure here. Your form is going to try to actually submit. You don't want your form to submit. You want it to run your code instead of the submit code. So that was another thing, because some of you Googled form submission and you were like, hey, let's go grab these inputs using a form library. And then you start bringing in a form library, and then a bunch of inputs started going up here automatically because you're using form libraries. You're doing all this other kind of stuff that if you were doing your own project, you can do. But just make sure that it wants you to copy and paste from the textbook. That's what it literally wants you to do. So go find an event listener that's from the textbook, copy and paste it right here and start editing it. When you do form validation, go copy the get by ID and copy and paste that in there. If you copy and paste from the book, this assignment would be a lot easier. Okay. Oh, another thing that I saw, the third step, the third task is 100% different than the second task. Those are 2 totally different things. So all of this code right here, you do not touch any of it for task 2. This should be task 3 by itself. So you might even put yourself a note if you haven't done that. This is task 3 only. And then you are going to separate this, and then you're going to go down here and do task 2 code down here. So just make sure that this stuff up here is way different than this. I have found that for me, task 3 was a little bit easier than task 2. So if you get frustrated with task 2, just comment your code out and then work just on task 3. Going back to order, I would do the validate input first. I would do the form submission next. On the other hand, you need to call the form submission inside your event listener. You're going to do form submission, and you are going to actually pass all of these in. Now, I'll give you a huge hint because I don't think it's that hard for you guys to figure out. But you're going to do let the document, you probably don't have to do because the document is already built into this. But so the list, is, here's how you have a list. These are lists. So the list ID would be the div surrounding it. So it's this thing right here. So this is good code. Here, I'll let you know. That's good code. That's how you want to do the list, because then once you get inside this one, then you can go inside that and grab the other stuff. So then you would do pilot status, co-pilot status, fuel status, and cargo status. These IDs, that'd be inside the list. The pilot, keep clicking on the wrong one. The pilot would be pilot, the pilot name, right? Or pilot ID. So you can do an ID like this if you want to. I think the way that they want you to do it, in the form validation textbook, last time I tried to search for it super quick and I could not find it. If somebody can find it a lot faster. Right here. Yeah, you're going to copy and paste a lot of this. So let form equal document query selector form. You can, instead of doing query selector, you could do element by ID. That's perfectly fine. But then once you get the form, that's where you can do input name equals, and then that can see how this says username. You could do pilot name right there. So you could use this line right here to get your input for this thing right here. So just copy and paste from the textbook, and this stuff will go a lot easier. Yeah. That's how I'd grab those. And to be honest, inside the script, that's the main thing is you're going to add an event listener. You're going to shove this inside there. You're going to go do the get element by ID and pass these in. So the next thing would be the form. And then from there, you're going to get the pilot, the co-pilot, the fuel level, and cargo level. So grab the form. I could pretty much just grab, it's literally just, you could do it this way. And then this would be like, the pilot would be this, with pilot, I think, pilot name. I think that is actually okay code. So copy and paste, edit. That has helped. That whenever I did this on my own, that's all I did was copy and paste, edit. I actually wasn't even paying too much attention on what I was doing because I literally copied and pasted so much from here. I'll read the questions. Yeah, and so CJ was saying the same thing is with the fetch. You go to the fetch unit, fetch section, and it says it has some code in here. I thought it had better code. Yeah, like this right here. You can pretty much just copy and paste this fetch. And remember, different browsers in different years and different JavaScript, whatever. Sometimes you can just use the response, but I would use this thing right here. I would just copy and paste this fetch thing. And then from there, start doing more stuff. So that's my first thing that I would do. Go do your fetch. Where's your fetch? There's my fetch. So it says await fetch then, right? Well, half of it's already there. So I don't think I put that in there. So yeah, do console logs here to see what actually looks like whenever it comes back. I would also highly suggest, I posted a while ago that one that says like console log response or JSON stringify. I think this is it, where you just grab whatever you want. Because yours is already a JSON, it should just return back, but at worst, you can use something like this. This is what you want to actually display. So I'm console logging this thing, I'm stringifying, meaning it making it look better. The planets returned is the thing that I'm trying to print. The null, don't worry about. And then this 2 is a styling thing. You guys can Google this if you want to, what these mean, such as, is there a replacer? I don't want a replacer. And then the spacing. And this is the spacing that I Googled and I liked the best. So that's all that is. This might print out to your console a little bit better. And then from there, start figuring out, okay, so I want the name. Remember, you got to do the star or the money tag, whatever. And then you're passing in the name. So you could probably just do name. Now add destination info. Isn't that here somewhere? So once you get a response, you need to do 2 things. Correct, like somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but you need to do 2 things. The first thing you need to do is call your helper for the pick planet. So you're going to do something like pick planet, and you're passing in your listed planets. This is going to pull in all planets. You're going to get a random number, and then you're going to return planets with the random number. This is more or less the structure there. I didn't do all the code. That's what I would consider bad code syntax-wise, but logically, it's right. So you need to get a random number, and then you're going to return planets.random number, and this is going to return a planet. And then what you're going to do is you're going to then call the, I don't know why I scrolled up that far. No. Add destination info, and right here, you're going to add in all the stuff that it wants. It wants all of this stuff. And so then it would be like, planet equals this. That I'm getting into bad code again, just so you know, but it'd be something like this: planet.name, planet.diameter, planet.star. This is one way. I've actually seen it done a couple different ways, but this will get you on the right page there on how to do that. And then make sure that you call them in appropriately down here. I think that's the main thing besides the form submission. There needs to be a lot of if statements, but whenever I looked at people's if statements, everybody knew how to do the if statements fine. So I'm not going to go into much detail there, but that's like making sure your fuel level is high enough, your cargo's low enough, and then how to change the inner HTML, which most people knew how to do from copying and pasting. So I'm going to read through the comments, and then I think I'm going to be done. Yeah, read each other's comments. There's a couple of people saying different things. Yeah, different. Yeah, you can put them all in a list more or less and separate them out later. Some people are calling out those dev tools, just to show you. Oh, let me show you a working app again, just so you guys can see. So as it loaded, it did all of this top stuff here. When I do inspect, this is where you can start doing, it's so big, I don't even know where I'm. There is a debugger in here somewhere. Yeah, you can go straight to the sources here and hit like a debugger point there. And so then whenever I load, it'll go here and it'll start telling me some of my values. And then I can just step over and keep going into them. So this debugger here is pretty cool. Like